What's going on, brother? How you doing?
I'm good, man. Yo, I'm really excited for this episode.
I am very excited. I mean, it's so weird. I feel like every episode we're going to be like, we have a great friend of ours on today. But we really do. I mean, we have another great friend of ours on today.
Except we don't have that many friends. So eventually we're going to have to ask other people to be on the show.
Yeah. I don't know. After episode 9, we're kind of fucked.
Yeah, right. Our 9 friends. We've used up our 9 friends. But Hugh Fitzgerald from 87 North.
87 North, 8711 action. I mean...
And he's in development for minted content. He's a fight trainer at 87 North and 8711.
And I mean, Hugh has been training with the who's who of the film industry.
For a long time.
For a long time before they were anybody.
Yes. And so it's so appropriate. He's a BJJ Black Belt, for those who don't know. Extremely talented martial artist. Gifted teacher.
And he comes from the old school world of MMA. Yeah. Before it was out there, but when you really, if you were into it, when you had to really, really go out there and find it and get it.
Yeah, I mean, not as a fighter, he wasn't, but as a trainer and looking for the right people and who to learn from and all of that. And which is why this movie, Redbelt, that we're talking about today, and this particular, the opening sequence of Redbelt, it's perfectly appropriate for him because he's been in the business that long and he's been in jiu-jitsu that long, but also because he was a protege of David Mamet, who wrote it. And he worked
and he was on set for the scene.
He was on set for that scene that we're going to talk about today. So it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. So I have a feeling we're going to get into some really great, really in-depth conversations with Hugh. And I kind of can't wait to see
when do we not
the rabbit hole that Hugh goes down and he takes us with him. Because if anybody can tell a story, it's that guy. So I can't wait.
Yeah. Hugh knows how to tell a story.
For sure.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, Hugh, most people don't know he's a magician, too. And his whole magic journey started on this movie, too. And, I mean, you listeners will learn more about this as you go through this episode. But Hugh is a complicated, challenging guy to understand because he's got so many levels to him. But he's so giving at the same time. I think you guys will see that in this episode.
Absolutely.
Or hear it if you're listening to us.
And then we would just like to thank all of our sponsors for making this episode possible. So first, I would like to thank Tactical Black, my favorite run and gun training group. If you want to learn how to be safe on set, guys, if you want to learn how to point a gun and shoot a gun and look like a professional doing it, there is no other option except for Tactical Black.
If you want to learn how to shoot guns while you're being shot by cameras, Tactical Black is where you go. If you're in LA, but they do travel around. We rented to them. They've taught here in New York.
Yes, they have.
But their home base is LA, and definitely look them up. Fight or Flight Entertainment.
Fight or Flight Entertainment. Brett Copes.
Yeah, man.
I think Fight or Flight, I can't do it without having the sound effects in my head of Fight or Flight, just being like, cha-cha-cha, or...
Yep, Fight or Flight. It's an entertainment rigging company specializing in flying people.
And from the best. I mean, Brett was the head rigger for Cirque du Soleil, so I don't think there's anybody I would feel safer flying.
He is the guy. Like, I am not a rigger by any means. I know enough to just kind of be my own safety person.
You have a pretty exceptional knowledge of knots, brother.
Well, that's because I used to race sailboats and stuff, so I knew my knots before. But in terms of rigging, I am not a rigger, but I've studied a little rigging, and a lot of what I have learned is from Brett. And he is definitely the person I call for questions, with questions. So Brett's a good dude, man. Glad to have him on board as a sponsor of the show.
And then we've got Metro Camera Car.
Metro Camera Cars, Joe Baris. Joe Baris,
the greatest thing about Metro Camera Car is if you've ever wondered how it is two people are talking in a car and they're shooting a scene, whether you're shooting from the back seat, whether you're shooting from the front seat, whether you're outside, whether you're in the car next to him, Joe is the guy to call who can get this shot done. That is literally what he does. Is there's any shot that has to do with a car, inside, outside, Joe can do it.
Well, and what's cool is Joe is also a stunt performer.
Yes, he is.
And a stunt driver.
And he trains with us.
And he went to film school, so he understands that. I mean, he's kind of got this perfect Tootsie Roll of skills for that job. So Metric Camera Cars, they're based in New York, but they work nationally. They do a lot of coordination for commercials and really awesome stuff. We've worked with Joe a bunch. He's trained here. He's a good dude.
And last but not least, Stunt Contact.
Stunt Contact.
For that of which would make my life of looking for jobs extremely difficult.
It still is difficult.
It is.
But Stunt Contact makes it a lot easier.
But at least I wouldn't have to get in my car and go figure out what's shooting where and hope.
Yeah, so you need to know what's in development, what's currently in pre-production, what's in production, what's shooting now, what's wrapped already. Stunt Contact is the place. And their website is so well designed and so user friendly. It's just so well designed. And this is a reboot of the original Stunt Contact, which was just a like a newsletter, basically, like a production breakdown for stunt performers. And so this is sort of a reboot of that, which disappeared a couple years ago and is back now. And they're killing it. They're doing a great job. So Stunt Contact.
Stunt Contact. And let's not forget, most important, and our Patreon.
Yes. Our patrons, our members on Patreon, we love you. We can't do this without you guys. We have sponsors. That does not cover all our bills.
So please support us in best way you can, as little as possible, as much as possible, whatever it is. Again, it comes out of our pockets if you guys don't help us. So we would definitely appreciate it. My wife would appreciate it.
Well, listen, and you can give as little as $1. You can give as much as you want. But there are tiers. If you go to the Patreon, $5 tier, you're going to get early access to our shows and access to the members only chat on the Patreon. And
we have a $20 tier. $20 tier, we are going to make a very cool limited edition enamel pin that we will be sending to all of our $20 Patreons. And
up, 20 and up.
20 and up.
Yep.
And then also, we have our live show.
Yes, all our patrons will get free tickets to our live show, which we're hashing out ideas how that's going to happen. We've got, we've got like another 22 episodes to think about it.
22 episodes.
But you guys will have free tickets to it. We've done 4 so far.
Nice. And only 9 friends.
Yeah. Cut that part out. No, so definitely check out our Patreon. And if you dig what we're doing and you want to help us do it, you can throw in a couple bucks.
So I also just got to note it before that looks like you, man.
Yeah, this is me. This is me, and I think that's you.
This is me. This is me.
Yeah.
So I have my own pop and you have your own pop.
I do.
That's pretty awesome.
And this is a prop, not a pop, but you see what it says, folks.
So that is from the grocery store scene, and They Live. And then I met John Carpenter last year, and he was nice enough to sign it for me.
Yeah. So can we get one that says, watch fights with friends?
No.
Okay, just pretend we're TV and watch us. And here we are, the Redbelt, in honor of the movie we're discussing today, Redbelt. So don't fall over, Steve. You didn't have the beer yet.
No one's throwing you.
Still full.
No one's throwing you. You should be able to stand up.
Yeah. So, hey, I think we should bring on Hugh. What do you think?
We should bring on Hugh. Hugh Fitzgerald, the one and only.
Cool. Come on in, Hugh. We'll see you in a minute. So here we are with the great Hugh Fitzgerald from L.A.
From 87 North.
And 8711.
And 8711 Action.
Yeah. We're so glad you can make it, dude.
My pleasure. And once again, I was sharing with other students and people that we both know that any opportunity to see your faces live, and it's not just a bunch of text messages and memes, which I'm also known. It's a nice reconnection, and it's great to see you in the space. And
yeah, man,
right back at you, two awesome individuals.
The kernel of our discussion will be the opening sequences of Redbelt.
Mm-hmm.
Where it goes from there is where it goes from there. But before we get into that, let's talk about, because this is like 2008 the movie came out.
Right.
Where were you at that time in your life? What brought you to Redbelt?
That's a great question. So I had actually met Dave Mamet back in New York many years prior while I was in theater acting school, theater directing, theater acting at Circle and Square, and had been working and dabbling as a playwright and as an actor off Hudson River, off Broadway, and found myself at the Ensemble Studio Theater, formerly run by Kurt Dempster, may he rest in peace. Amazing guy. You don't know his history. I'm sure you guys do, but for anyone that's interested, it's storied and really wonderful. We happened to be doing American Buffalo at the time. Part of the second year where they were asking for people to go off and find a local theater of your choosing that you can volunteer at. I kid you not, I walk into EST. There's Bill Macy, Kurt Dempster, and Dave Mamet at the top of the stairwell. And I have a copy of American Buffalo in my hand. And I don't know, call it what you will, but I just got the courage, walked right up to him, tugged on his shoulder and said, "Excuse me, Mr. Mamet, but we're doing your play and I'd love to take some time to talk to you." And he looks at me and goes, "Yeah, sure. Yeah. What do you want to talk about?" Right on the spot. And it was great because it was happening at EST. It was with Bill Macy, their history in Chicago. Long story short, we developed a relationship. He gives me his home address, and at that time he was living in Massachusetts. I wrote him a letter, not expecting to hear back from him. A week later, I get a letter. "How's the writing going? How's the acting going?" And I thought, this is a different individual, and I'm really lucky. And then I started to tell people, which many people didn't believe what I was telling them. I said, "I've got this pen pal going with this famous, wonderful, generous man, David Mamet." And we just struck up a dialogue, and I would ask him questions, and then he, as busy as he was, would offer his advice, send me some books on directing, playwriting, writing in general. He comes out west to essentially move, and also he was brought out here to do some films. So the first film out west that I got to be on was Spartan with Val Kilmer. And basically, once again, it was, "Thank you so much, Mr. Mamet." He goes, "Okay, this is what I'm going to have you do. I'm going to have you sit down here. Don't say a word. Just watch what everyone's doing. Know everyone's name. And that's it." And that's all I did. And then started assisting on plays that he was doing locally. And then that led to Redbelt and the unit on CBS, which he wrote me in as a character.
I love the unit.
I basically tell people that I got a film education, writing education from this particular individual that I hold dear and precious to this day, because he has taught me just about everything I know about structure, writing, story analysis. And that led into his love for jiu-jitsu. He'd always had a love for the martial arts.
That was my question was, were you doing jiu-jitsu at the time, or?
I was, but in New York.
Yeah. Right.
And so I had a wrestling coach, years prior in high school that had lived in Japan and done Japanese jiu-jitsu, which I had maybe heard of, but I didn't understand to the extent, which, as for those that don't know, a lot of locks, very similar approaches. There's interwoven with some judo, but he started, he said, wrestling, this is how he broke it down. Wrestling stops, the jiu-jitsu finishes and picks up from where the wrestling stops. And I just felt like we thought, we were hearing a foreign language, but he would show us these really cool wrist locks. And I thought it was a natural progression from wrestling into that world. And that's what I always loved about it. And so that is the impetus for me to continue on and want to go. And then David just fell in love with it and had that, as we all have, our love affair with the martial arts, and fully immersing ourselves into it like I did in a wonderful way. And then he says, I just want to write a film based on my love of the art. And that's how that came about in its own iteration. And just got to see and witness some of that process, which is interesting. And once again, he goes, you're going to meet the Machados. I'd heard about the Machados from Henzo's out east and other schools. Land over here, go to Inasano Academy, meet John Jock. I meet John Machado, and then Higan and Hanato Magno, who runs Street Sport.
Right, and he ended up being the Hanato Magno ended up being the choreographer for Redbelt, correct?
Right,
or one of them at least.
One of them. Rico Schiaparelli, the wrestling, Hanato primarily, and Hanato having a role in it, John having a role in it. So the Machados were always on set.
And Jack Gill was the stunt coordinator.
That's right. That's right.
Legendary.
And so it was this perfect storm. Yeah, exactly. Of being in the world with a great director, Chicago actors, New York actors, friends of David's, guys that became my friends, and then jiu-jitsu. And I sat there. There were moments, I'm not kidding you, where I go, wow. Like if you just capture this moment, this is like a perfect scenario for what I dreamt about and wanted to do. And it's happening right now. And then became Ricky Jay's assistant out of that, because I met Ricky on the set, and all these amazing people. And then went on to even assist David more often.
Right.
And that led to the unit. And then he goes, kid, hey, so I'm come over to Fox Studios. I wrote you in as a character. I hope you don't mind. I'm a huge fan of Bonanza. So I decided that I was going to, you look like a Cartwright. So he writes me into the show. And I go, wow. And then got to meet the tactical experts there and more jiu-jitsu, literally having.
So I just want to say something really quick. Steve, what's the name of our paintball team?
Oh, the unit. Our paintball team, we were on a tactical paintball team, and the name of our team was the unit.
That's right. And it was.
Wow.
And that was kind of like my favorite show at the time.
Yeah, for sure.
It was a lot of fun. So, it was baptism by fire for me. I tell people also that I came from a theater background. You have the luxury of table readings and rehearsal process. Suddenly you get into the TV world, as you know, and everything's like, we got to go. And I'm literally in the trailer going, yeah, but I don't know my lines as well as I think I should. Can I have a few more minutes? And they're like, what are you doing, dude?
So yeah, they're like, that's $2,000 a minute, please.
You know what I mean?
I want to rewind a minute and go back to Redbelt. We're kind of moving on from Redbelt, and I want to just stay on this for a second, because the script is like, or the version of the screenplay that we read is very, very different from what we saw on screen.
And at this moment, we'll just encourage again the listeners and the viewers to watch the links in the show notes, and so watch the sequences we're talking about, so you know what we're talking about.
Absolutely. And we're basically talking about almost pretty much the opening scene, when she walks in from the rain, and
well, even before that,
I mean, it's almost but what's so weird is trying to describe the scene. I'm looking at you and I'm like, am I describing what we read, or am I describing what we saw?
Right.
I guess,
because it's two completely different things. So those are one of the things that we actually want to talk to you about.
Right. So Hugh, you were on set that day.
Yeah. That was
when they shot that opening scene. Yeah.
One of my favorite scenes. And that's Max Martini, who was in the unit that's getting choked with that nice bow and arrow. And it was
playing Joe.
He's one of my favorite character actors in everything.
Really,
by the way.
Really
that guy's
amazing
awesome.
guy. The thing about just as a little bit side note, everyone on that set and on David's set, they're wonderful human beings first. And that's, as we all know, because we're in the industry, those are priceless. So Max Martini's in it, and they're working through sequences. You've got your rolling arm bars, flying arm bars, the bow and arrow, which I think, as we all know, really translates well. It's a wonderful choke, but really opens up both the actors for the camera. just being in that, creating that world and that dojo, if you will, for that scene was that, back to what I said earlier, that moment of this can't be possible. Like to have that mashup of all these arts come together. And it was wonderful. That's Hanato and John from my recollection. It's been a while, but John, who I trained with in Culver City off and on for a bit, was really that kind of a little bit more of the, if I can say, of the flourishes and the dynamic, which we see a lot of today, which we can get to at some point if you want. But for back then, really, this was the first time that people were seeing this, because I would listen to everyone watching and they'd be going, wow, that's jiu-jitsu? I hadn't seen that. So there was still that unknown, untapped, untouched element to the grappling arts that we started to see and David wanted to showcase in movies.
I haven't watched it since back then, so I rewatched it to prep for us chatting, and I got such nostalgic feelings watching it now, like almost 20 years later, seeing all the cameos of all, and like the behind the scenes of prepping a fighter to go out into the ring, like all the stuff that I've spent so much time doing that I haven't done in a while. Like
I kind of miss it. Like I had just gotten into it, with you when you were kind of on your way out.
Yeah.
And it's kind of weird, but I'm like,
well, and just, like meeting with the commission officials, like little things that other people don't pay attention to. But like when you're watching it, you're like, oh, that just has such good memories. And then just that it was still sort of a pride style fights. They were allowed to wear gis, like all, it's like, it's a very, it's a time capsule,
It is a time capsule. And it was ahead of its time for really what it was. And then you had the likes of Randy Couture, who at one point, this wrestler that comes in was dominating everybody. He's on set acting, as a technical advisor as he should. Then you have Guru Dan and Asanto, David, Guru Dan, John Machado, Randy Couture.
What an insane background of people that you have there.
That's the whole thing. Then
that's amazing.
You get these Chicago actors like Vinny Guastafaro that's there, and you're just like, and then Ricky Jay is like off on the side doing sleight of hand magic tricks. I go, I'm like, world.
We'll get to your time with Ricky Jay, but briefly tell the listeners who is Ricky Jay. And there's a great documentary about him out there that people should watch. But who is Ricky Jay?
So Ricky Jay is, in my estimation, and many others, the greatest magician that has ever lived, next to Houdini and all those, the greats. He's up there in that tier. And as a sleight of hand artist, for certain, I am convinced of that, having spent years with him, and as a backstage magician's assistant, that what I saw was pure genius and otherworldly. Having said that, he became friends with David Mamet back in New York, long time ago. I believe actually they met in Chicago. Then they both ended up living in New York. And through that friendship, because I was close to David and I had met Ricky a few times here and there, and David said, Ricky needs an assistant. He wants somebody. And would you be willing to do this? I said, absolutely. And I had always loved magic. And I didn't quite know what I was stepping into. I have to say that, because once I got in it, there was this little bit of like, once again, how did I get here and what's going on? And I used the phrase, it was magic. It literally was. And then to be able to tour with him around the country and around parts of the globe, and spending a ton of time with the likes of David Blaine and others up in Canada, and the people that Ricky knew, from Bob Dylan to all these, there was so much more to it. He was just that genius character, larger than life, that he passed too soon, and I consider a great friend and a mentor. But that's all because of David, once again. That's how things just sort of happen. And that, and then to come to find out that Ricky had a love for and always wanted to, he was he'd done a lot of karate, Kempo karate, and then some Taekwondo. And then he started to watch David and I got a story for you. We were at the Geffen Theater for one of Ricky's shows, and I was up in the green room, and David comes in and he goes, Hey, Fitz, come here. I want to try out this move. So we're in a hallway. We have guests.
It's like my brother after a Steven Seagal movie.
Yeah. And Ricky's in his dressing room because he wanted it quiet. But I looked down and told you who was at the end of the hallway waiting to meet Ricky. And then all of a sudden, David and I are like tumbling, rolling over each other in the hallway. And he's trying to get me in a omoplata. And I'm trying to jump on his back and choke him. And all of a sudden, Ricky's door opens and I see his face peek through and he goes, what the hell is going on? Oh my. And he slams the door shut. And David's like, just keep going. I got to get this. And I'm telling you once again, I go, I'm rolling with David Mamet through a hallway at this playhouse. And that's the beauty of it.
And so,
long story short, that's my relationship with Ricky and David in a nutshell.
So for those listening also, so Ricky played the sort of corrupt fight promoter in the movie.
Fight promoter.
And
he was so good.
And I mean, it's an old movie. We don't have to worry about spoilers, I think. But there is a whole sleight of hand sort of part of the corruption deals with sleight of hand and magic. Usually on all these episodes, we will find in the screenplay the section of where the fight was written, and then we'll kind of start from there. So when we tried to do that
for this scene,
it was completely different. And so I think it's like,
even when we thought we found like a part of it where we're like, okay, we're going to start, let's go from here. And then we go one paragraph in, and then all of a sudden it doesn't match him.
So anymore. in the final cut, right, we start with Joe being handcuffed with they tie up the rope to mock handcuffs. Mm-hmm. He gets into a fight, the whole lesson about, fighting when you're disadvantaged, or is it an advantage, or what's an advantage and a disadvantage because he's handcuffed. And then that whole thing happens, and then they wrap it up, and the class ends. And then as he's leaving, Mike, who is the coach, says, "Oh, so you want to be a black belt?" And then kind of Snowflake ambushes him, punches him in the stomach, and then we have the little scuffle that ends up with the bow and arrow choke.
Right.
And then, the final standing arm triangle where Mike is like, "Come on, there's this escape for everything. Mm-hmm. And then the fight ends there. And we had picked that scene to talk with you about it because now, all these years later, you're a noted coach, and we wanted to talk about coaching and jiu-jitsu coaching. But then, so we went to the script to find that.
It was tough.
And we couldn't find it.
Couldn't really find it.
At least not in this version of the script. So, and I know that what you love to do, because we've trained together, in the script, at least the version we have, and everybody in the business knows there's rewrites and things change when you're on set and whatnot. But it's like in the version that we have, the class has the handcuff scene, except there's a gun in play too, and they start grappling for the gun. And you and I know that we love grappling with weapons, and there's this whole thing where they're grappling for the gun, and then when Joe says he's tired, one by one, the coach makes him.
He sends in.
He's in Shark Tank. He sends student after student after student. Right.
That's right.
Now, and it's weird because when we watch the scene in the movie, it's obviously like you're escorting him to the court. They're making that, and when I went back and I read it, I was like, it made sense that the court guy would have a gun. So it was weird that they took it out in the movie after I read that. So just, there were just a few things I noticed. I was like, oh, it would have been kind of, if they had the blend of the two.
I guess what we're saying is we love the way it was originally written.
Yeah. It was, it was just so descriptive. And then it kind of helped, again, all of the character development, it really worked in that scene.
And I'm wondering,
the way that it was written was so descriptive.
you having been there, was there conversation about this on the day?
There's the conversation, as the three of us know, we're coming in with an idea, right? So we have this idea of how we would like it to go. And I'm dealing with this on a daily basis with this script that I'm writing, which I've told you about, where that's what I want. And then what that DP is going to require, the director, whether it's me or someone else, is going to require budget constraints, time constraints. So it's also bringing someone on as a technical advisor, as Chad did with you, knowing your expertise and saying you're in good hands because you're with Sensei Steve, which I gathered, correct me if I'm wrong, and we should say he knows Sambo and understands this world. Now that
sure, yeah, it was shocking to me.
To bring your own to it. So what ends up happening is you'll bring in a Machado, legends in their own right, and they say, "Well, this isn't quite working. They're fumbling a lot. Like, how long do we have to put into smoothing it out and making it very professional and clean?"
Well, and it also worked in the scene. I didn't mean to cut you out, but where they had one guy who was obviously much better than he was, switching from scenario to scenario.
Right.
Instead of him sending in different guys, they're like, okay, this guy who's clearly better than he is just going to calmly switch from this scenario to this scenario to this scenario.
Sure. And I think another advantage, right, was if it had been, and don't get me wrong, as a coach, I love the way it was written because we do this stuff for real.
Yeah.
Right. But from a storytelling perspective, we got to see more of Mike, the character, Mike, the coach. We got to see him actually do his thing because it's just two guys.
Mm-hmm. That's it.
Right.
That's it right there. So you just said it. So we're back to what's the emphasis on this story as the hero, and how do we feed enough information for what happens next? So if we divert too much from him, then we're almost pulling the audience away from to the point you made, which I think is bang on, Steve. And you know that it's like this. You understand this world, and I think that's a smart choice personally. Mm-hmm. However, from our perspective, like you're both saying, we want to see that,
Sure. Even in the way it's written at the end of the class, Mike gives Joe his black belt there.
Yeah.
And in the movie, he doesn't give it to him till later in the police station in the locker room. Right.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's interesting that, and I don't know the answer to that one, but I would venture to guess there's this dynamic, because I was reading back on some of my favorites of his. This is 3 Uses of the Knife, which I've been writing some notes in. We get to it, and how it correlates to the martial arts and the mat and writing. But that it's sort of we're introducing the belt, which has that significance that we understand. Then we put the belt away, but we need to get back to that belt at some juncture in the story, that payoff. So Mamet, because it's in his book and what I got gathered from him, says there's a payoff. It's the Chekhov, grab the gun, stick it in a drawer, but we know we're going to get back to that gun in that drawer. It was even an Iron Claw. And that's great structure and storytelling. So I'm just kind of grasping here maybe a little bit, but I think that's may have been a choice as to why not the payoff isn't going to happen right then, because it's almost like, okay, we've reached it, the climax, we're done.
Well, I mean, again, you bring up artistic choices, and you just said Iron Claw, and which is, if you know the story of the brothers, they completely took a brother out of the movie, and literally for artistic reasons. So and those choices do have to be made. So it does make sense,
right? And there are those choices, and then you hope that the choices are valid and they work. They don't always work, but spoiler alert, they introduce the gift to the dad, and that gun reappears, and it's to somebody's demise. That's right. The Chekhov. That's the Chekhov world, right? So I don't know, but this is all great because when you see usually you've got your first draft, like the one I'm working on right now.
And by the way, you can this movie is so old, you can just talk. You can go for spoilers.
Okay.
If you haven't seen this movie by now, it's your own damn fault. So if you want, you could talk about what happened to, he killed himself and all of you. Just go for it, man. Just talk.
It's safe to say there's about 9 iterations. And most people don't, wow, how did they write that? They wrote it over a weekend and they got the first draft out, unheard of. So once again, but consideration to budgeting and suddenly.
And well, considering what we've read and what we saw, it's obvious that wasn't the case.
Right.
Sure.
It's very obvious. But it's interesting because the three of us like that, what was missing, but we can understand choices that would make sense.
Sure. Speaking of choices,
we've got to go there. We've got to ask. We're chomping at the bit. We can go to the end.
No.
Not yet.
Let's put a pause. Let's put a pin in that.
You let me know
and dial it back a little bit because I want to know. At some point, you made the choice to go to New York and become an actor,
right?
And start jujitsu. Tell me about that. When did you end up here? Because you went to NYU, correct?
Yeah, and I'd always had a love and a fascination for the theater world and theater arts and acting, but also was writing quite a bit. And I thought, well, I should start seeking out conservatories. So I went up to American Conservatory Theater in San Francisco, even prior to that, just to see if it's that world and environment that's basically full time. I'm glad there was no video footage of it, but I was doing tap dancing. I was doing ballet. You guys, it was really.
Hey, listen, if you tap dance as good as our friend Christopher Irk, right? Then show it off.
I always try to take it to the next level and get on top of the piano and do it, and I'm falling on my face. Whoa. Anyway, but that led to get to an acceptance in New York and saying, you know what, it's terrifying, but family's originally from New York. It's a great time, young enough to go and do it, and just throw caution to the wind and go. But I'd always been in athletics, always been fascinated since I was a young kid with the martial arts. And there's always this sort of, even with everything going on, there's this little nagging, like, you've got to get back into it. Got to. And this was actually at a time where it wasn't, that era of people kind of knew about it, but still didn't. And it was sort of this unknown underground world, especially with jiu-jitsu. The jiu-jitsu took off and is what it is today, where I just drove by 15 studios and they're everywhere.
There was a time when the only what the public knew of the martial art world was on the cover of Black Belt magazine.
And those of us who were paying attention to grappling and stuff like that, we were just on the underground, like mailing each other videotapes.
Right? And it's I was going to say, I was watching VHS tapes my friend sent me.
Yeah.
Like that was how I watched fights.
Like if you knew somebody who was a blue belt and you could practice, that was like cool.
Or they would call you or your buddy would have been like, hey, come to the gym. This one guy from this gym is going to fight this guy from this gym.
Which is interesting on that note, because I was in Chicago.
And they're buddies, by the way. And they're buddies. And they're going to beat the crap out of each other and then hug it out. And it's the weirdest thing you're ever going to see.
That's the thing. I didn't know that Chicago, you guys might have known this, was such a hotbed for underground fighting long before it was really anywhere else. So we're in the south side of Chicago doing a seminar. This guy, we're driving by and he goes, that underground, the basement of that building were some of the greatest fights that ever took place, no holds barred. Like one person walks out and you win $200 and bracket. And this was in the 70s, early 80s of Chicago. I thought, wow.
Riley was kind of known for taking remix to places and asking gyms if they wanted to. And then
here in New York, there was the Underground Combat League, and it was like the famous story is that Frankie Edgar's first fight was there, right? So a lot of people
really
on the underground. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I love
a lot of us.
Love him.
And even Kareem Ellington, who I coached in the MFC, his early fights were on the Underground League. And for anybody who's interested, there's Jim Genia wrote a great book on. It's called Raw Combat. It's on the underground MMA scene, and it's not even MMA. They didn't call it MMA back then, but it was like the underground fight scene in New York City. It's a great book, and it's a really good time capsule of that, the blackout years too of like MMA when it was being banned everywhere.
I forgot what building it is, but downtown, like literally in the financial district, I forget what building it is, but there was a building I went and saw a fight in when it was being built.
Yeah, sure.
And then I didn't realize it until I went in it, and I was PA and we were shooting something in there.
Yeah.
And I was like,
in New York, we were the last state to legalize it. People don't, like you'll say to people like, well, MMA wasn't unbanned in New York till 2016.
That's
and
right.
People are like, what?
Yeah, I know.
That's not even 10 years ago.
Can't believe it.
I mean, I remember when I went to the first UFC fight at the Garden, like the first legal.
Yeah, the first UFC once they unbanned.
Like we had coached fighters in kickboxing fights at the Garden and stuff, but never full just MMA.
So you're in New York and you're trying to be an actor, and then you get this urge.
I was just going to walk into Henzo's, and there weren't a lot of jiu-jitsu studios, and back then, it was like literally. I look back on it fondly, but you got to find like an actual existing phone book that hasn't been ripped out of the phone. And you just start thumbing through it to look for like a martial arts school that may do. I was actually looking for Japanese jiu-jitsu. Like I wanted a kung fu. I was always wanting like the ultimate martial arts place that would cover kung fu and then Japanese jiu-jitsu and then some judo.
And have all that
I wanted
mythic stuff.
Ninja training. Where can I find ninja training?
Right.
You know what I mean? So,
well, you wanted the Southside Jiu-Jitsu Academy from Redbelt is what you wanted.
Exactly.
Seriously, right?
And then look what happens, right?
Yeah.
But so that's what that led to that, and then it became naturally just part of my DNA and spoke to me, and fully once again fell in love with something that I dabbled in and got away from, and I said, okay, this is incredible, and then back to coming out west, and then David was just fully in. And then I started training with him and others at Hanato's, and then went to John's in Culver City, trained down at the Gracie Torrance Academy off and on, and became a mat rat once again, and the likes of the Dirty Dozen, Chris Howder, who I've gotten to know, all these great Cindy Amatsu.
So for those listening, the Dirty Dozen, right? You're referring to the first 12 Americans to get a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt.
Yeah. Right. And at a time when, as you know, it was not accepted. And for Americans to go to Brazil, of all places, and be as good as they were, it was really frowned upon. And I've talked to the Machado brothers at length about this. That two parts. First of all, women weren't allowed into the men's classes. Cindy Amatsu will say she had to stand outside of the Torrance and Redondo Beach garages and be invited in after the men left. So she's the first female American Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. A close friend of mine and really amazing. But those stories say a lot to how far we've come from that era. And there's still some of it, but the realities being that it was very exclusive, invitation only, secrets, the secret scrolls, as we call it. And, once I met the Machados, and they're just really awesome human beings, I kind of came back to the source, per se.
Well, I mean, right, there's that whole, the Machados and Asanto, Paulson, like that whole sort of family of really legendary people.
Right. And that goes without, all the Ron Bilicki, the Chad Stahelski, Damon Caro, David Leach out of Jeff Amata, the list is a mile long, but think about that era. And then to be able to run.
And for the listeners, just so they know, they don't, Chad Stahelski and David Leach, the founders of 8711, Jeff Amata, who now is an amazing stunt coordinator, second unit director, like all these people started in those humble beginnings of that group.
They did. And this was a time when they would spar and go at each other. And Patrick Trey, the Navy SEAL buddy, I'm sure you know the name. He was a disciple of Guru Dan's and trained with Ron and Chad and David as well. And Damon, he said that teeth were knocked out and people were knocked out left and right. And liability reasons, they had to put a stop to it. But this was the Dog Brothers, basically, and Matt at that time was, okay, you ready for this? Because, and then we're going to do these 3 against 1 and let's see what happens. That sort of stuff.
Right.
So different time, different era. I really believe that the likes of David and Chad being who they are and where they are is because of that. It's a different way of looking at fighting and training that is without question part of what we see on the big screen. And the challenge is getting to that level, which I don't know, we can all attempt and strive for, which is great. But that's 35 plus years of them. It's a serious training. I mean, are we taking somebody to the emergency room? Because, Eric Paulson, who was a professional fighter and coming back and forth from Japan with Chad, this guy, I've rolled with him and it's no joke.
Dude, Eric's a beast. You do not want Eric's hands on you.
You don't want to be underneath him, and all you can do is survive and try to get out from underneath. I call him the school bus. Get out from underneath the school bus. But you learn a lot from that.
I'm not a school bus. I'm
just saying.
It's just a Volkswagen bus.
You are a Volkswagen bus, dude.
Fast forward, what is it, 16 years or whatever since Redbelt. Now you're coaching jiu-jitsu for these guys at 8711, 87 North.
Which has got iterations also, because we now work a system, my background being what it is in the grappling arts, but I have been probably 2 years now, really intense, getting back to judo, working with 2 really close friends that are FMA backgrounds. In my estimation, the best. They're disciples of Guru Dan, Kali Silat. So we do a hybrid mix of stand-up, striking, wrestling, jiu-jitsu, takedowns, judo, grappling, locks. And then we, as you know, we toss a knife into the mix and go from there and let it go.
Sounds like our combat sambo class. You
watch the threads, it's about 5 systems working in concert to the best of the ability. And then we adjust and fine tune, but it's so much fun and creative, and everyone seems to love it. And I will reference you because of that. Before I forget, I wanted to share with you what we started implementing more of is not just the knife drills, which it blows everyone's mind, first of all. It's as close as you can get to with that adrenaline spike, and everything you think gets thrown out the window fast. And you're just what? How do I not get stabbed? Primary. And then from there, when do you relax? There's so much to learn from it. But the pausing, we start with the free roll, pause. And then everyone's in the periphery and I go, what do you guys see here? What are the options? And I got that from you in Toronto.
Yes.
And I
got that from
now.
That's straight from my coach. Yeah.
Fantastic exercise, because they're now getting the chance to see it as a designer on the periphery. When we're in it, that's one thing, but from the teaching and looking at it from a director's standpoint and a writer's standpoint, designer standpoint, is to say, is this working? Where do we adjust it? Maybe they're not quite understanding it. Let's break it apart. And that exercise has been incredible.
Yeah, man. I mean, I was telling Paul, because the first time we met in 2016, the first time I was at 8711, and then 2019, we went to LA for Paul's birthday, and I told him, you're going to feel at home over there. When you get on the mats, you'll feel at home over there. And it's rare to find a place that you are so comfortable in. And I felt that way. And you know, I remember in 2016 when I went to 8711 the first time, and everybody's like, oh, you're going to take Chad's judo class? That's not a judo class. Like, why are you calling it a...
Right.
It's not a judo class.
Judo class. Like, my class is not just a Gracie Baja Jiu-Jitsu class. And I make it clear to everybody. This is, for lack of a better term, whether you want to call me Willy Wonka, Peter Pan, whatever it is, but it's from just that blend, that mashup of many, many, you know, amazing mentors and systems that I believe work together. And then it expands our awareness of how similar so many of the arts really are. But I go, if you're looking for just a jiu-jitsu class, I would like to save you the time and the frustration, because it's not. Chad's is not just a judo class. No, that's what it's called.
Well, neither is Steve's class. And I think that's why his students are so dedicated and have been here for so long. And, you know,
right.
Because it's not a normal class. He's not a normal teacher. And neither are you.
I'm Abby Normal.
You know, you're Abby Normal.
So this is the point I want to make. I tell people, we take the training seriously. We don't take ourselves seriously. And that's different. And we find each other like we have. We all know, you know, and when I came out for that seminar at your place, it was like putting on my grandfather's flannel shirt. And I go, that feels like home. Because I grew up in that environment. And then I go, and you guys are legendary. And it's a space that's just so unique and so New York and cool. That's the same sort of feeling I have. I go, this is awesome.
It is a vibe. And you're right. People find each other. I mean, and that's part of this business, right? This business is about, I mean, it's a relationship business. We talk about it all the time, but it is about finding your crew, you know, finding it for sure.
My grandfather, I said it to somebody the other day, said he two things he imparted on me, many other things, but two that I remember is he gave me a compass. He said, stick this in your pocket. It was one that he carried when he was in World War II. And he said, you always know which direction is north, you know, baseline navigation, and just keep going, know where you're going. Number two, he said, be very, very selective of who's in your foxhole. Taps me on the shoulder and walks away. And that's it.
There's that video out there that's like, there's 5 types of friends in this world. And I remember I said to Steve, I'm like, you're all 5.
That's it. What a beautiful...
I'm like, you're all 5, dude.
I'm 6, all of the above.
What are the...
Or 7, none of the above.
None of the above.
No, there's like you have your ride or die friend. You have, you know, there was just a different category. You have the friend that when you're like, you have an emotional time that you can go to, that you know can count on, that will listen to you, that will give you good advice. There's like 5 different friends, and I'm like, Steve, your name, Steve. I was like, and my wife was one of them. But otherwise, I was like, you are this like guy for all 5.
And you're going to get the truth. So the whole thing too is, it's not
I always get the truth from him. I was like, that's majority of those 5 is like, who's going to give you the truth in that situation? And that this man is 100% truth.
The fair weather friend is, you know, yeah. No. I want somebody who's actually, maybe this is an East Coast thing, because it's far and few between out here. As much as it stings, I'd rather know, because that means that you actually give a damn, as opposed to me finding out you didn't give a damn a year later. And that's priceless. So you guys are lucky. A lot of people never know what that friendship is. And that's the martial arts too. Back to this point of like, this is what that gift of the martial arts meant to me and still does. And I think it should, because it's a community of, look, I mean, we're all
look, 15 years ago we met.
Yep.
Because of martial arts, and here we are.
And I mean, and just to show, like I'm a Krav Maga expert, and we all have our opinions on that, and like the fact that Steve lets me come here and teach that is one of those things where it's like, I don't think I've ever taught eyes, throat, groin ever in my entire, like, it's just, you know what I mean? It's like, there's just this certain thing, like people are like, oh, jujitsu is this. And I'm like, it's not that.
It's not.
It's what you think it is.
Right.
And it's not what it really is. And I do have a very good question for you, and it's very, very important.
Yes.
Take your time if you need a minute to answer it.
Yeah.
But here's my question. If someone was to ever put you in a rear naked choke, would you run up a wall to get out of it?
And here's an answer. It depends if they're paying you to do that. Is there a crash mat involved? Right?
There's always an escape, Hugh. There's always an escape.
There's always
except when there's not.
It depends on what kind of a wall. Texture of a wall. No, to answer your question, sure, why not? Why I got to try it once, right? You'll find out fast if it doesn't work.
It worked in Redbelt.
Yeah, it works in Redbelt. They pulled that off.
Yep. On concrete too.
That's right.
But I've got to be honest with you. At the end of that movie, that is one thing I have always secretly wished that would actually happen. Is you see that like the MMA fights where like two guys that like have a fight upcoming, they'll fight in the stands.
Oh yeah.
But you've never seen like two gurus go at it like in the crowd. Like I kind of secretly am like that.
I wish.
Great. That would be great.
So great.
Like two of the senseis that just have this beef that no one knew it's been going on forever. And
it would be so great.
Suddenly the whole every camera goes to the center of the ring under a spotlight. And here they are just going, and they're talking in their native language, and like 20, 30 years ago, blah, 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 blah. And now, listen, you write that, it'll get made. I'm telling you now. That's awesome.
Dude, I wish that when he does the wall run at the end to get out of the choke, I wish it was the same choke from the opening sequence.
Yes, the front triangle.
Because remember, he's choking Joe with the standing arm triangle choke, and Joe the cop is not getting.
There's always an escape. There's always an escape. Mike's like, there's always an escape. There's always an escape. It would have been great if they revisited that and he did the escape.
And then he did the escape. That would have been cool. But they didn't tie it together that way.
That would have been cool.
Now that we're back to coaching.
Yeah.
What do you have going on in your life now, Hugh? What's on the horizon for you, 87 North? Any projects you're working on?
Yeah.
People you're working with?
87 North is going full steam ahead in Fall Guy, which got to see an advanced screening of. It's fantastic, wildly funny, entertaining, everything it should be. And David was the perfect candidate for this movie, and his experience and love of stunts. They've got a lot of things on a lot of fire, irons in the fire. Also, they're tethered to minted content, which I'm a part of. And so
just so people know, what is minted? What is minted content?
Is run and owned by a buddy of mine, Lance O'Connor, and he primarily not limited to big budgeted commercial production house. At one point, contracted for a long time with the Navy. All the promos you'd see of the aircraft carriers to all the Marine Corps promotions, that was all Minted. Minted did David's Apple iPhone snowball fight. So David's on the board as a director with Minted, and we're all kind of cross-pollinating. Lo and behold, David Mamet shares the same office space right down the hall. So once again, everything comes full circle. And so at Minted, I came on as a consultant in development for their app divisions for Android, and which is pretty cool. As a personal trainer, fight instructor, and And then I've got this script that I have found a director for, and that's a low budget independent film that I'm determined to get made, and it will. And also just continuing to train a lot at 87 North. We get to see David and his wife Kelly all the time, which is great. And they're constantly on the move, as they should be. But what's really interesting now is building having this idea of building a team, a pro level team, of getting everyone to the same level playing field, of this idea of learning the martial arts, but also tailoring that, as Chad did and David and others, for film and TV. But first things first is that we are going to learn the correct way to do things, put the time into it, and then the rest of it will happen organically and on its own. And we play around with scenarios, previs. We film just about everything we do now, so we can take a look at it, start to cut it up, edit it, different camera angles, which is fun. There's just so much available under that roof. And the talent that's in and out of 87 North is tremendous. And with someone like David at the helm, you really can't go wrong. And he's constantly raising the bar. It's always that. Let's remind ourselves where we are. Number one, this is possible, but this is what it takes to get there. And my job is to hopefully be that conduit and that teacher or coach that says, I can't make you do it. I can guide you along that journey from my experience, and friends like you guys that, would love to see more of you because of your background and Sambo and Krav Maga and all this. I'm always thinking of how to bring in talented people to just, build that repertoire and tool belt. We started going out to the beach on Fridays and grappling in the ocean and doing open workouts outside just to get out of the comfort zone and just get different environment, what it's like to fight on.
Steve actually has a really cool story about getting out of about completely opposite of the ocean, but the ice, about your Canadian state, the trooper.
Oh, and I've used that story. That story.
Yeah.
Well, he was Alaskan.
The Alaskan, sorry.
And this was, his name is Steve Jimmerfeld, and he was my friend Timothy Kuth's coach, and he was an Alaska state trooper. And as the story goes, well, he wrote a book called Cold Weather Defensive Tactics. I don't know if it's in print still, but I have a copy of it. And it was all inspired by, if I'm telling the story correctly, but the spirit of the story is there. His partner was killed on the job by somebody during a road stoppage. They get into a scuffle. The guy, I think if I remember, the guy had just gotten out of the joint or whatever, and it was a terrible story. Like Jimmerfeld's partner was close to retirement. They get into some kind of altercation, and he was killed because they got into a grappling situation on ice, and none of the stuff that they had trained in the nice warm gym worked on ice.
Couldn't get his footing.
So they
couldn't
find any purchase for his feet, couldn't do anything. And also, as I remember the story, he was spinning around inside his parka, because his arms are getting pulled loose of he got mummified in there, and he was smothered to death. Right?
Wow.
And so what happened was the department realized that there was a gap in their training by being inside a gymnasium or, wherever, a nice, comfortable place that is completely different from the environment in which they work. Mm-hmm. And they went out onto a frozen lake, got suited up, and fought each other. And just fought each other. And one of the things they realized is within 2 minutes, they couldn't grab anything anymore because their fingers were frozen, right? They couldn't do anything. And they realized, if you're underneath somebody, you want to do a sweep, you can't put your feet on the ground. You have to put your feet on them. And
right.
They started adapting all these tactics based on the environment, right?
Well, when I was in, it was like when I was in Israel and they show all the wrist breaks, they do a lot of the rolls, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, yeah, but we wear jackets in New York. I'm like, if you try and roll out of someone grabbing your jacket, you're just going to roll it tighter. So that was literally why I show all of the sambo breaks.
Yeah.
For wrist breaks.
That's like the first time I asked Oleg Taktarov, like, do you do much nogi? He goes like, dude, I live in Moscow. Right. Like I grew up in Moscow. It's gold.
Right.
We wear jackets.
It's like choreography where in Chicago and anywhere in the Midwest, East Coast, you can have a scarf on, you have a hoodie, motorcycle jacket, business jacket. It's you have to pay attention to that. You need to train. You know, we do our wall work, throw a hoodie on, throw a scarf on, or a business tie, and that business tie.
Watch a hockey fight.
Yeah, hockey fight. Great example.
But it goes back to what you were saying before about just taking them out of their comfort zone. You know, what I love about training with you guys over there is that you, like you said, you are trying, and you know this because you train a lot of performers, actors, and stuff like that. Like it's easier to unlearn in a way. It's like if you're already a skilled fighter, a skilled martial artist, and you need to do a scene, I think anyway, it's easier to unlearn something than it is to start from scratch and try and teach somebody to fake it from the beginning. You know,
right?
And there's an authenticity in your movement if you actually.
It's easier for me to teach a trained fighter how to remember and act like an untrained fighter and throw a punch than it is for me to teach someone untrained to throw a great punch on camera. For me to it's so much easier for someone to dumb it down than it is for someone to been like, I got it.
Yeah. And especially working with a lot of the student films and stuff, and you'll come in and you don't expect them to know what they're doing. That they're student films. This is the whole point. They'll say, hey, I need a stunt coordinator or a fight coordinator for this thesis film or whatever. And you read the script, you break it down with them, and then there's a big fight scene or whatever. And then you're like, okay, have you cast this yet? And they're like, oh yeah, we've already cast it. And I'm like, okay, did you audition them or even check what their physical abilities are? No, they said they could do, you know, this, that, and the other thing. I did a semester of stage combat or some whatever. They say something, then it almost inevitably ends up to you're gonna have to rewrite this.
Like you're just gonna have to smack them. You're gonna have to smack them in the face,
unless they're. And they'll say like, well, how much rehearsal time do we need? And I'm like, well, I don't know because I don't know how they can move. We'll see. They could show up and be geniuses. They could show up and not know anything, you know.
But the realities are too, if somebody's doesn't have proper conditioning, they're not beyond 5 takes of something that's challenging, and you have to address that. Sometimes it's just that initial interview conversation. And do you have any sense of what a front kick is, and really breaking it down? Because then you can start to design. Well, we know what they can do, and then we're gonna have to adjust.
It's like I know how to kick hard,
right,
and make the person I'm kicking feel it. But do I know how to kick hard and make the person who's watching me kick the person who feels it?
Right.
I know I'm kicking hard, or is he just like, why did that hurt him? That's the difference between like fighters and film, and selling that pain that in really it's not there.
It's a really fun process. I mean, to me anyway.
It is. I agree.
To build all this up and kind of do that archaeology and see what the marriage of, okay, well, what can this performer do? What is the story we want to tell?
Mm-hmm.
What can this character do? Not the performer, but the character. And to try and find some Venn diagram, the center part where it all seems to make sense, and tell the story that you want to tell with the abilities that the performer has. And so it's fun. It's really fun.
And that's crafting a story, right? So that lends into the way you approach things as a writer. It's the way you look at the world. It's the way it's cinematography.
Well, that short that I sent you, that was based on the person that I met. And that was like, I'm like, you'd be really cool. I have an idea for you.
Yeah. Right.
And then it goes from there.
Because your sensitivity to that is sharpened And that's why I tell people all the time, it's all connected if you choose to see it. It's all there. Instead of compartmentalizing, let's look at how many similarities there are. And that's the cool thing about this work with Sealot, and how much of that ground fighting system was actually related to jiu-jitsu. Worlds apart, but they are so similar. And I go, that was a teaching. I had no idea. And I love that. Constantly discovering something new about these art.
Hugh, it was awesome to talk to you.
Thank you, guys.
Today, man.
My pleasure.
We're done? We're done? This is it?
Yeah, this has been over an hour. Can you believe it?
I feel like sometimes these like these interviews, when they're done, it's kind of like when you're out and you have a curfew and you have to go home to like your wife and you just can't have another drink, but you really want to talk to your buddies. Every time we end these, that's what it feels like.
It's like when we were talking with Joshua James, who wrote, everybody check out the Joshua James episode, but he wrote Pound of Flesh, and he also wrote the new Scott Adkins movie that's coming out. But we were talking about when the movie's over and you're just not ready for it to be over. You're like, what? That's when you've got
something too. And they that is golden. And then there was a quote, I forget who said it. It said, "A poem is never finished. It's just knowing when it's time to walk away."
Which I think we need to walk away from this podcast.
There we go.
We're going to keep talking.
But this is why, because we love to do this, and it's been a pleasure, and to see your faces and hear your voices. It's really, thank you.
No, thank you.
See you soon. We got to do Disney again, bro.
Oh yeah, and you guys please come out and see us whenever you can.
We will.
And I want to get out to New York this summer. I think I was telling you, Steven. So keep the seat warm, and I'll be out there.
The mats are waiting. Right
yes.
Here. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, totally.
Fights with Friends is brought to you by Breakfall Studios and Press Record Studios. Executive producers Stephen Kepfer, Paul Veracci, and Tiago Benedetti. Produced by Matthew Kaplowitz. Associate producers Becca G.T. and Jared DeCroce. Our video editor is Matthew Kaplowitz. Original music by Aru Luster.